Hello and welcome to this Friday's morning market briefing. We've got lots to talk about, but firstly, let's not go overboard on worries about AI's energy use, Bill Gates does say, as well as that US regulators sanction Boeing over disclosures about door panel inquiry. We've got lots to talk about on the charts, also with lots happening on the economic calendar. We'll come to that near the end, so make sure you stay around so you can see that. Before we get straight into it though, make sure you subscribe. The first article to talk about is to do with Bill Gates and AI. Now, the world famous founder of Microsoft, Bill Gates, has now just come out in saying that individuals and governments do not need to worry about energy use from AI systems. This comes in his recent speech at the Breakthrough Energy Summit in London, in which he said that AI technology would offset its heavy consumption of electricity. Now, of course, we're always talking about AI on this channel, as we kind of amidst this AI revolution, it does feel like. Only a few days ago, we were talking about the likes of Nvidia, who of course, had at that moment just become the most valuable publicly traded company in the world. And what's kind of pushed Nvidia to the upside there? Well, ultimately, it's kind of been this AI hype, with Nvidia driving, of course, the AI revolution through the production of their chips, especially their chips, more recent chips, which they've specialized or, at least said that they're focusing those chips towards, the training of large language models, large AI language models. And so ultimately, the topic of AI has been a topic which we've covered extensively on this channel. And this topic of AI energy usage, I've found to be a very interesting topic as well. And we've highlighted it a few times on this channel, of course, with a few different minds speaking on the matter previous to Bill Gates, of course. And I think one of those important times which we spoke about AI energy usage was, of course, when we spoke about what those large oil giants were talking about, those large gas giants, the nations which produce also the oil of the world. And ultimately what they were kind of saying was that basically, because of this new AI revolution, we're actually going to see a step away from this kind of green energy wave that we've seen over the past 10 years, 20 years maybe. And that's kind of been, a period of hype of its own, a kind of period of hope, arguably, within the kind of Western world towards, how we can better achieve, kind of energy sustainability, how we can kind of, be a sustainable species on the planet. Ultimately, though, this AI revolution has seemingly come along, in which, it's kind of demanding, a great deal of energy, a significant amount of energy, which these oil and gas giants are basically saying won't be able to, be powered. This AI revolution won't be able to be powered by the switch to green energy. It's just not quite there yet, and it's quite possible that it will never be able to get there due to, of course, its limitations and just the extensive energy usage that AI has, and as a result of that, we're never going to be able to fully dedicate a green energy towards such a kind of industry, such a technology. Ultimately, though, what we're hearing from Bill Gates here, who of course has been kind of one of these green energy advocates, someone, as we'll talk about with this article, of course, this summit itself is something that which it prides itself on it, its goals to do with sustainability and green energy and that kind of thing. So Bill Gates himself has been someone which has really strived for this greener world, and here he's basically saying that doesn't need to be as much of a worry as everyone's making it out to be. And in fact, we're not going to see as much an increase in energy consumption because of AI as many people are speculating and worrying about, as this kind of was a topic, or at least still is a topic, which many are kind of concerned with, as if we're trying to make this green switch, but at the same time we're trying to kind of revolutionize our industries and make our industries more efficient through the use of AI, but that's going to require, fossil fuels and a greater amount of kind of, harmful chemicals and that kind of thing, not chemicals, but of course, harmful fossil fuels. Then ultimately, what's the kind of, how are we going to deal with this dilemma? What are we going to weigh up to, be more valuable than the other? And of course, different people will side on different sides of that argument. But Bill Gates is basically saying you don't need to pick a side here. Ultimately, the benefits that AI is going to offer and what AI is going to be able to do for the world is ultimately going to offset the actual massive increase that in energy consumption which AI might require, as ultimately the kind of offsetting nature that AI will have through its kind of efficiency improvements and that kind of thing will in fact actually bring down the kind of increase in energy use that we might expect, which is a kind of very interesting thing that Bill Gates is now coming out with Bill Gates also going on to urge environmentalists and governments to not exacerbate or go overboard when concerning the huge amounts of power that is required for AI. Many environmentalists and people around the world have begun to worry recently about the extremely high energy consumption caused by AI technology, with this becoming more relevant as massive big tech companies race to invest billions of dollars into vast new data centers. Bill Gates' greatest achievements, Microsoft, is one of the biggest tech firms leading the race with regards to investing billions of dollars into vast data centers. He went on to say that the data centers will drive global electricity usage between 2 to 6% higher. Microsoft itself had to admit back in May that their greenhouse gas emissions had risen by nearly a third since 2020 due to the large construction of new data centers required for AI. He did note, however, that tech companies would pay the higher price for clean energy, whilst they seek new sources of power which would be used to power AI development. The Breakthrough Energy Summit in London, where Gates spoke, it was hosted by the Breakthrough Energy Group, which was founded by Bill Gates himself. The group also includes Jeff Bezos as an investor and has invested into more than 100 companies. So, a very kind of interesting conference there. Interesting summit in which Bill Gates, of course, addresses those concerns, but some would, of course, also say that, Bill Gates is somewhat invested in this manner because he is ultimately so related to Microsoft, so invested in Microsoft, who basically is leading the race at the moment for the kind of generation of new AI models and that kind of thing. So, we have to kind of question relations maybe, but definitely an interesting article there and something to keep your eyes on. That's all to talk about in this article, though. Next article to talk about is to do with Boeing, with US regulators now sanctioning Boeing for their recent conduct. Now, Boeing has now been sanctioned by US regulators following the company disclosing new information about an inquiry into why a door panel blew out mid-flight. This comes in a move by the National Transport Safety Board, who said that Boeing had blatantly violated investigative regulations and even a signed agreement. Now, of course, this was a topic of, kind of extensive discussion when, of course, the Boeing plane's blowout did take place, and that I believe was on an Alaska Airlines flight. Also, I believe it was around Portland, Oregon, may have been Washington, pardon me if I'm wrong, but ultimately what we did see on that flight was, the flight had just taken off, only a few minutes into the flight, when of course, a door panel which had kind of been boarded off, and seats had been placed next to the door, which, could have been used otherwise, ultimately blew out mid-flight. Luckily, of course, there were nobody kind of seriously harmed, nobody died, which of course was a massive, something that was quite lucky, and obviously kind of shows the kind of how good the conduct of the crew and the captain was, but ultimately this has kind of become a very significant point of controversy, especially for Boeing, and has driven Boeing's stock price down amidst a number of other controversies to do with kind of Boeing flights and their Boeing's conduct and that kind of thing, especially with the kind of rumors to do with whistleblowers and overall just the kind of media fallout which has really come from this incident. So this has kind of definitely become a topic of concern, which we've covered previously around the time, of course, that blowout, but since then we haven't covered it as much. But this is still a very important topic to cover, as it's something which, as I said at the start, is affecting Boeing's stock price, which is something that we followed previously on this channel, and I still think is an important thing to follow. And also, I think it weighs into the way that maybe other airlines, start to work on their own conduct, and therefore it affects their kind of their share prices and the way the general public perceives air travel as well. So that's why this topic is, of course, of such importance, with the incident having strained relations between Boeing and the government agencies even more than they already were following the January blowout. The sanction was imposed on Boeing after the aeroplane manufacturer held a briefing with journalists on Tuesday in which they detailed their quality improvement efforts. Boeing is already facing multiple investigations from both the Federal Aviation Administration and even the Department of Justice. The sanction was justifiable since Boeing had offered opinions and analysis on issues that might have caused the accident, which violated the agreements on the investigative info, which is why we're now seeing this fallout once again. As it did mention, of course, within that article, Boeing is still being investigated by numerous agencies and authorities, and of course the results of those investigations will massively impact public perception and therefore the stock price of Boeing. So we're still always kind of listening out for key pieces of info coming from those investigations, and I guess this was just another piece of information that we could kind of grasp to do with that issue, of course. So definitely keep your eyes on this topic. Very interesting to kind of look at and stay up to date with, and as I just said, we'll definitely keep up to date with any more news coming from such investigations. But that's what we'll talk about on the articles. Next to talk about, like always, is the charts, where we're beginning, like always, on the US 30, on the Dow Jones, where sadly not as much is happening at the moment for the US 30 than maybe usually, but arguably, as we'll talk about, as we'll get into it, I'll also note the kind of things which might be taking place on the economic calendar today, which kind of explain the lack of movement. So ultimately, as for the Dow Jones, whilst at the start of the week we did see price sell off from those kind of higher levels, which price ended off last week, which kind of lined up with this key liquidity zone. So price did sell off from that level to start off the week over the course of Tuesday. On Wednesday, of course, in yesterday's morning market briefing, we covered this. Price did interact with this key liquidity zone, this key Fibonacci level of 50%, Fibonacci retracement level of 50%. And so we did note, of course, how that kind of did kind of weigh into perspectives that maybe, price could now swing to the upside and continue this move to the upside, which is commonly what we of course see when price does kind of move to the upside, retrace to the downside, interact with these key Fibonacci levels, and then we expect that continued move to the upside, as we've seen with other kind of indices and other assets before. Of course, you all know that though, and the kind of level that we're expecting price to kind of move up to was of course that minus 27.2% Fibonacci extension level. Instead though, what we've seen over the course of yesterday is kind of price consolidate and stall out. Price did kind of wick into this weaker level of liquidity that previously price has interacted with, and that level had acted as a key area of resistance previously. So arguably it does make sense somewhat that price has stalled out, but still it is quite interesting to note the fact that price hasn't kind of gone on this serious upswing after interacting with that key liquidity zone. And instead, we've really seen price stall out. So definitely keep your eyes on the US 30. It'll be interesting to see though as I kind of alluded to earlier, that, because we're receiving the US inflation rate figure today, as well as the US consumer sentiment figure, add to that, we're also having, or at least by the time you're seeing this, Biden and Trump will have gone head to head in their presidential debate. So all of those kind of things are weighing on the markets at the moment and kind of explain the sideways price action that we've seen for the US 30, as ultimately when we expect, big news, big data, price does move to the side, and in anticipation for such news. So I think, with all the data coming up today, that's when we're really going to see price move to the upside or move to the downside. So definitely keep your eyes on the US 30. Next to talk about though is the dollar, which is continuing this kind of rally to the upside, which is seemingly formed over the past few weeks. As once we kind of reach those higher levels around the 14th of June, when we broke out this kind of range that had formed, price did retrace somewhat, interacted with that 38.20 level, then swung to the upside once again, where then we've seen another retracement from that kind of price level, in which price has now interacted with that key liquidity zone that we noted out in yesterday's morning market briefing and on Tuesday. So price reacted to that key level, that's 61.80 as well, swung to the upside, then kind of reached that 27.2%, minus 27.2% Fibonacci extension level over the course of Wednesday, as we noted in yesterday's morning market briefing. And then over the course of yesterday, we're seemingly retracing once again to the downside. So it really does seem like we're forming this very clear rally to the upside, this rallying movement, and it is kind of very interesting to see play out. Now the question will be though, whether price will continue this bullish rally to the upside after price has now interacted with that 50% Fibonacci retracement level, and whether it now will continue this swing to the upside, as of course we are receiving, as I noted in with the US 30, we are receiving so much kind of dollar data, US data today, that it'll be interesting to see how things do play out for the dollar and whether price can stay within this I don't know what we would call it, bullish trend, that kind of thing. So definitely keep your eyes on the dollar. Next to talk about though is Euro USD, which kind of stays within this range. In yesterday's morning market briefing, of course, we noted out the fact that price had seemingly formed this triple bottom. We weren't 100% sure on whether that had formed or not, because price was still around those kind of lower levels, but seemingly over the course of yesterday, price has swung to the upside somewhat, therefore confirming the fact that this has now formed a triple bottom. So this level of liquidity and support is very significant indeed. So it'll be interesting to see whether we just remain within this range to end off the week, or in fact, due to the amount of data that we are receiving today, also from the Eurozone, as I'll get into on the economic calendar, whether we will see Euro USD break out this range or not. Next to talk about though is pound yen, which is just continuing this bullish drive to the upside. We've now breached and we are holding above the 203 level, which is of course very, very significant, and we're kind of inching closer and closer to those levels in which officials, as I noted in yesterday's morning market briefing, those levels which officials and analysts warned that the Bank of Japan or government of Japan may intervene to kind of boost the currency once more. Next to talk about though is Bitcoin, which remains above the $60,000 a Bitcoin level, but ultimately not much can be said for Bitcoin at the moment, as price does consolidate and just kind of stall between the 60.5 thousand dollar a Bitcoin level and the 62.5 thousand dollar a Bitcoin level. So definitely keep your eyes on Bitcoin. Interesting moves, but ultimately not too much happening at the moment. But as I've said before, the Fed's monetary policy massively impacts Bitcoin. It's why we've seen this sell-off recently and stall out in price. And so, the US inflation rate figure that we are receiving today will have an impact on Bitcoin, I do believe. But obviously, make your own judgments and have a look for yourself. Next to talk about though is gold, which has kind of swung to the upside after this, push to the downside that we noted in yesterday's morning market briefing. This was a kind of swing to the downside that we did expect, we did note, because price had interacted with that 38.20 in key liquidity zone. But we were expecting at least price to interact with this key liquidity zone and support level before price would swing to the upside. But seemingly price came inches away, literally centimeters away, before, swinging to the upside. So, somewhat predictable price action there, but it will be interesting to see how gold does play out today with the US inflation figure coming out. Lastly to talk about though is of course oil, which is now at the top of this kind of period, at the top of this consolidation area, which has seemingly formed amidst all the data, all the information, of course, coming from the Middle East, as people do speculate about, a potential war with Hezbollah and Israel. So definitely keep your eyes on the kind of Middle East and on, kind of demand and supply for oil at the moment. Lots to kind of look at there and lots to keep your eyes on. That's all to talk about on the charts though. We covered lots there. Lastly to talk about, like always, is the economic calendar, which I alluded to a lot before and throughout this morning market briefing, as we are receiving a great amount of data today. Now firstly, we are receiving the Japanese unemployment rate figure and Japanese industrial production figure. Those will heavily impact pound yen, so definitely keep your eyes on them. Followed by that, we're seeing the German retails figure, as well as the British GDP growth rate figure, and followed by that we're seeing the French and Spanish inflation rate figure, as well as the German unemployment rate figure and Italian inflation rate figure. Followed by that, we're seeing the Spanish consumer confidence figure. So lots of Eurozone data to listen out for, which will be impacting the euro, of course. Followed by that, though, across the pond, we're receiving the Canadian GDP figure, as well as the US inflation figure, which I alluded to earlier, and the US consumer sentiment figure. So lots of kind of US data and Canadian data, maybe you could say, that we are receiving today. So definitely listen out for all of that. And I did also note those kind of key Eurozone economic data points, which are also being released today. So listen out for all of that. But we've covered lots in the articles, lots in the charts, and lots in the economic calendar. Hope you have a great trading day. But that's all from us at Wildwood Capital. Have a great one. See you later. Bye.